What is up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of the Camera Junkie live stream. Another week, episode 119. Yes, that's 119 consecutive weeks of the Camera Junkie live stream. And as always, I thank you for taking the time and hanging out here with me. My name's Lewis, also known as Mr. Camera Junkie, and if it is your first time here, please be sure to say what's up in the comments or in the live chat so that you can get the nice Camera Junkie welcome. And with that being said, you'll be getting that warm welcome from the Camera Junkie crew. And let's go right ahead and see who's here in chat right away. Today we're doing things a little bit different because I'm going to be doing a tutorial instead of a podcast, and I'll get into it in just a second. All right off the bat, we have Mr. Paul Duncan, Mr. Moderator. The face is because I actually thought that I had the comments fixed right from the get. So the fact that I have to come here and adjust Mr. Moderator's comment here to fix it. It's so funny with Ecamm. I actually left a comment from last week, and I was like, let's lock it in like so. But I think I'm gonna figure it out why it won't stay the size that I like. But I digress. All right, so here we have Paul saying what's up to the fam. All right, we also have John saying hello. There we go. That looks good. And Gretchen also saying hi to me and to Aiden. Let's see where he's at. He's over here hanging out, giving me the side eye while he plays with his toys. Paul is saying what's up to John and to Gretchen. And this is what I mean. This is all part of the Camera Junkie crew, and everybody's just saying hi to each other. Well, today we're going to be taking a little bit of a different view on the podcast aspect of it, because instead of recording it, I have plenty of recordings already in my hard drive. So I need to get to actually editing these podcasts. And when I was thinking about that, I was saying, you know what? The crew should know more or less how I use Final Cut Pro to record or to actually edit the podcast when it comes to both audio and video. Even though it's video podcasting that we're editing, I actually still take it as a audio first approach, which is all part of what we're going to get into. So I said, let's kill two birds with one stone, and let's show the crew how I edit using Final Cut Pro. And that's what we're going to be doing today. So with that being said, I'm going to be taking this from scratch. So from scratch, I mean, I'm going to just have Final Cut Pro opened up as if you had never opened it up before. The reason why I'm doing this is because me on my own journey, transferring basically my known skills that I had applied in the Adobe suites prior to having a Apple computer and using their suites, and now totally being converted to Final Cut Pro. I did find that it wasn't as intuitive as I would have thought. So that's why I want to emphasize on how to just start your projects with Final Cut Pro. And it could have just been me because I was moving from the Windows side, and there's a lot of things that are Apple based, like that. It's part of like the norm in the Apple culture, that basically everything is drag and drop. And I come from the aspect of Windows where everything was a directory where you had to direct what you wanted to get from a particular file or substrate in that aspect. So maybe if you're coming from the Apple world, the Apple universe, this is very intuitive to you, but it wasn't so to me, and that's why I'm going to cover it. So with that being said, first thing that I'm going to do is open up Final Cut Pro. But just a little bit more information. I have 2 video files, right, of Doc Rock and Katie for this week's version of the Flow podcast. Now, I am going to start editing those files as if we weren't using Ecamm. So a lot of you might know that I love using Ecamm. It's what we're using right now to get all of these amazing shots, get multiple angles, get my, oh, is it coming? There we go. The, overhead shot. And, oh, I thought I froze. I kind of did for a second. That's just the phone. I need to update that. But this is the power of Ecamm. And even though I produce this podcast and having the ability to actually save the files directly onto my hard drive, I'm gonna be looking at it as through the aspect as if maybe you just have 2 video files from a Zoom meeting from a completely different platform, and now you're just using Final Cut Pro to edit that in this instance or in this aspect. So I'm gonna also let you know that the files that I'm gonna be pulling in and how I utilize them can easily be created on a program like Canva, right? So that you can then utilize that in your edit as well, so that you can see how I can take something as simple as mundane and then spruce it up using a third-party program like Canva to create the overlay that we're going to use to pretty up the video, so to speak. So with that in mind, the files that I'm going to bring in can easily be created in Canva. I already have the downloaded video files and I have them separate from Ecamm, so hypothetically they could be coming from anywhere, and how I'm going to put them together to create a video podcast, still thinking of the audio listener first. All right, so with that being said, let's get into it. I see some people sneaking in here. We got David and Sly is here as well. We got Kevin just snuck in as well. All right, and Jim's hanging out here as well, is saying it's been a long time. It has been a long time. All right, so with that being said, let's get into Final Cut Pro. All right, and I should be able to hit this button here. Stream Deck and Ecamm makes this so much easier. Okay, so now we're in Final Cut Pro. I'm just gonna open it up, and with this I'm gonna once again reference, I just have these files downloaded. So the files that we're going to be bringing in, you can have them in a folder, you can have them, like on a cloud or wherever it is that you're sourcing these files. We're going to be bringing them in kind of drag and drop. I literally have downloaded them and have them in my downloads folder. So I'm going to be pulling them directly from that, and that's going to be my source in this case. So this is Final Cut Pro. And like I said, as soon as you open it, it's got some information there, but it kind of left me at a loss because I was even more used to, like I said, the Adobe suite, and it wasn't the most intuitive thing. So the thing that I want you to understand is that you're going to open up a library, and the library is going to contain all the information. So just like it contains a bunch of books, that's your library. It's going to contain all of your files, everything within it. And then within the library, you're going to create a project. And a project will, in this case, hypothetically be your very own book, your very own story that you're going to create within the library. You can create multiple stories or multiple projects within a library if you want to reutilize the files. And this is one of the conveniences of Final Cut Pro. But like I said, with that being the way that they set it up, it wasn't so intuitive when I was used to just basically thinking of only a singular project when it came to my NLE or my editor. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open up a library. Now, in this case, we can open up a pre-existing library. That's how Final Cut Pro works. But we're thinking at it like if this didn't even exist, and we're just going to be making a new library. So we're going to create a new one, and we have the what are we going to name it? So in this case, we're going to name it the Flow episode 31, because that's the number that we're on. And now that we've hit enter, we have a little bit more information, which now gives us the ability, as you can see right here, to import media. So that was something that wasn't clearly visible when we first opened up Final Cut Pro, and could have been one of those things that was kind of like a speed bump for me. And now we have the ability to click on this icon and use it kind of like the Windows base and direct it to your downloads folder and select the files that you want to bring in. But being that we're in the Mac world, we are simply just going to drag and drop. But once we have the files there, that still doesn't create a project where we can create our own story. Like I mentioned before, the project is the book that we're writing. So before we even import media, I will now create a new project. You can just simply click there, and I'm going to name it the same exact thing. The Flow. Oh, that's misspelled. Did I spell the other one right? Okay, I'm just double checking. All right. So the Flow episode 31, this is where we're going to put our settings. The Flow is in 1080, so we're going to do 1080p HD just to keep that. 30 frames per second. Apple ProRes 422, that's what we're going to be editing in. That's this computer is really proficient and efficient in this codec, and we're just going to click OK. So now we have our first timeline available, because this is where we're going to write our story on our project, and episode 31 is our first project. So now that we're here, we've created a project, a library that's going to house all of our stories, and we've created a project which is our story that we're going to tell. We have our timeline here, and now we're gonna just drag and drop the files that we need to bring into the podcast. Now, like I mentioned before, I downloaded the files, right? The video files of the conversation to my downloads folder. But let's say we had that in a completely different folder. You could either have this on a desktop. What I've chosen to do is that I've created another library that has a couple of files that I use to start off all of my podcasts with. And these are the files that I had mentioned before that could be easily created on Canva or just any of your creative applications that you utilize. Okay, and I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to open a library, and I'm going to open the Flow files. Now, this library is stacked on top of the one that I just created. So the Flow files that are here are in the same program and opened at the same time. This is a really convenient feature of Final Cut Pro, that you can simply copy and paste from one library to the other, just as long as they're open, so that you can reference those files. So because we've opened up the Flow files, I'm going to double click on that library, because that's where it's housing all this information. And I'm going to grab these files here, and I'm just going to double click this project, this story that I've created, and I'm going to copy everything that's here, just highlight it all, and I'm just going to do Command, or in this option, is it Control? I forget, because I use both computers. Should be Control. Well, anyways, we're going to copy the file and we're gonna copy everything. I'm running a brain fart right now, but because I'm thinking Final Cut, but I digress. Anyway, so we could just even right click it, right, and copy everything, so to speak, but just Command C. Let me see if you guys are correcting me here, because I can't remember right now. Okay. And now that we have that copied over, we're going to go back to our other library, or the one that we just created, episode 31. We're going to double click on this timeline. And once we're on the timeline, we're then going to do Control V to paste it. And we have those files now on this new timeline, which is, you see, thank you, Paul, Command. I just wasn't sure if it was Option Command or, but I digress. Thank you. So Command C and Command V, copy and paste it. And we've copied it from the other library that I had opened, the flow files, over to our new library, our new project, episode 31. Now I can simply just close the library that's called the flow files, and we're once again just dealing with our only episode 31. We click it, we double click, and we're on our timeline. Okay, and now we have our our beginning, middle, and end. And as you can see, the file that I have here is our intro music. Then it cuts into the main scene and our outro music. So if you could also notice that these files are basically green screened. I've created the graphic on Canva. In this case, it was through Final Cut and so on and so forth. And like I said, you can get your files anywhere. And it has these two cutouts, but set up with green inside of them. The way that we use this in Final Cut Pro is actually a plugin, so to speak, that we're going to click on the file that's called Keyer. So we're going to be looking into an effect, and this is the effects window in Final Cut Pro. So we're going to open up the effects window, and we're just going to type in the word key, K-E-Y, and we'll be able to see the option Keyer. And we're going to grab it, and we're just going to throw it right onto that file. Why did it do that? Let's Control Z, and we're going to reverse that. Okay, that's the effect that we're trying to get. So, okay, let's drop it in there. Perfect. You hit Keyer, and it takes and it eliminates the green screen, now allowing anything that's behind it to be shown. And at this point is where I'm going to grab the Doc Rock file and the Katie file, and I'm going to bring them in literally by click and drag. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to set it underneath the other files. Boop. So now what you can see is that as soon as we get over to that aspect, anything that's underneath is going to be shown through. And now that we've dropped it, it's a big file. What I'm doing right now is right here on this upper hand, we can see kind of like this little cheese wheel, so to speak, graph that's waiting for the file to upload. So once it's got the check mark, that means that from the downloads folder, it is now completely copied over into this library and now part of it, meaning it's created a instant backup. So I have the original file and now its own copy within Final Cut Pro, meaning even if I were to delete this copy here, this edit is no longer dependent on that file. It created its own copy so that it could continue to work. And I find that to be the most efficient with Final Cut Pro. Now I'm going to grab the Katie file and do the same exact thing. Gonna drag and drop it, and it's not aligned right now, but we're just waiting for, like, once again, like I said, the little cheese wheel here to actually just completely finish uploading the file. Now, my guess right off the bat is that Doc and Katie did not hit record at the same exact time. That's one of the conveniences of Ecamm. As we wait for this to load. Okay, that's finished. Okay, that once I'm producing the file and I finish and start the live broadcast, as soon as we're done, I have a finish and end start point to all of the files within Ecamm, and they're all pre-synchronized, so that once I get to this part of editing, I can grab those files and just drag them in, and they're already set that as soon as I line them up to the beginning, they're ready to go. All right, so as you can see, I'm going to hit this shortcut called Shift Z, and what it does is that it's taking all of the files and basically making them the size of your screen or your monitor. So I'm just going to close the effects window. I'm going to do that again. So as you can see, it's just adjusting everything, but we can see that we have both files. And if we scroll over here, we can just see Doc and not Katie, because Doc's video file is literally on top of Katie's. So the way that, you know, this works is that is just layers upon layers, and you as the viewer have to think about that you're basically seeing it from basically the top down. That's what's visible, and if something's on top of something else, it's literally going to block it. So we're going to use that to our advantage. That's why we're using that, you know, graphic to basically mask everything as just an overlay. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to enlarge the timeline so that we are seeing more or less what's going on. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this file, the one that we hit with the keyer, and I'm going to create a freeze frame. So to not mess up the the shortcut, you see it wasn't command. Okay, so we're gonna add a freeze frame to that file, basically right there in the middle. So we went to edit, and we can just go add freeze frame. It's option F, and now we have a freeze frame of the graphic that we created. Why did I create a freeze frame of that graphic? Because the freeze frame has already got the keyer applied to it. So just like the graphic that we hit is going to allow all the video to be underneath it to be displayed, but it also created a PNG, and the PNG file is basically as long or as short as I want it. So this file on top was a limited time of just basically 1 minute. Now I am able to take this, and with, you know, just selecting the edge here, I am able to stretch this out as long as I need to. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start stretching that out. I'm going to elongate this to the length of the entirety of the podcast. And now that we have that completed, you can see that the entire thing, as I scrub through it, is now set up with the green screen effect and the keyer taking that out. So now we can once again highlight back to the beginning and start setting things up further. Now we can see that Doc is taking up all the room, but Doc needs to be on the left and Katie on the right. So I'm going to highlight his file. Okay, actually right now, because this is an audio podcast, this is all like the things that we have to set up before we even get to like listening to everything, but we'll get to that in just a sec. We're gonna click on his file. Okay, and while we're looking overhead, we're going to adjust right over here in the inspector window his settings, and we're just gonna adjust them accordingly. And this is like no added special effects. This is all the tools that are built in with Final Cut Pro. So I'm not really using any additional plugins or anything like that. Basically just what you all have the capability to do with this program, and and the files. So right in the inspector window, we're going to shrink Doc Rock, and we're going to select the scale all in the transform portion of the inspector window, and we're just going to start bringing that down. As you can see, we've already kind of gotten him much smaller. We're at 65%, but now we're going to adjust his location, which is X and Y, the positions just above the scale all. And you can click on the X and the Y, and what you can do is that you can just use your scroll mouse, the scroll wheel on your mouse. Let me correct myself. So you can just use the scroll wheel on your mouse to make the adjustments granularly, but you also have the ability to click on it, and with your mouse just go up and down with like the left click pressed and held down. You can do that to get a much faster effect of where you want to locate said file. All right, so we got him cut off a bit. We're gonna bring him down. Okay. And it looks like 65 is too small, so we're gonna bring him back up. Okay, and we're gonna leave him at 70. 70 is gonna be Doc's size. Gonna go once again. Make sure we give him as much headroom as possible. And that looks good as far as centering his shoulders. Okay, and that's what I'm looking at. So now that I have that, as you can see, we can start seeing Katie's image underneath, right? But she's also taking up the entire screen. We're gonna need to adjust her image as well, but Doc's image is wide, so it's still encroaching on Katie's shot. And like I said, everything on top will cover what's underneath. So we need to adjust that as well, and we're going to stay right here in the same inspector window, and we're just going to scroll down to the crop aspect, and we're going to take the crop right, which is the right side of his image, and we're just going to start squeezing in there. As you can see, we can bring it all the way to his side, and we got Katie's face sneaking in the background. But what we're going to do is that we're going to just set it right there, and Doc Rock is set. So if I were to take the PNG file and press the letter V, which basically shuts it off, you'll see how I've taken Doc Rock's image and just made it fit for the overlay. Okay, so we're gonna turn that back on. And now we're gonna adjust Katie's image and do just the same. Okay, so we made Doc 70, I believe we said. So let's try 70 with Kate's just the same. Okay, and Katie at 70 looks much smaller in the frame. So I'm going to adjust for that, and we're gonna bring Katie up. So we're just basically making her kind of relevant size. And in this case, we had to increase because we started at 100. So now we've increased to 110. And let's see if that's too much. Kind of looks right. Just squeezing that over. And then I'm just going to give this a quick, scrub through. And that looks good. So now we can adjust Katie's crop just the same way, but because we zoomed in, it's basically going to take the entire image. So once again, just to demonstrate, Katie's kind of embiggened, Doc has been shrunkificated, and the overlay hides all the mess and makes it nice and pretty. So at this point, we're pretty much set up. The one thing that we would have to do is like listen to the actual podcast. Okay, and we're gonna have to align Doc and Katie up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the range tool. We can do that by hitting R on the keyboard, and the range allows us to just basically scan over this. I should be hearing this. And I'm not hearing any scrubbing. So let me see this. I'm not hearing anything at all. Because if I can't hear anything, editing an audio podcast is going to be really tough. I'm just throwing it out there. Let's check if you guys have any questions or anything. Thanks, Kevin. Yes, option F to add freeze frame. And look, let me explain to you guys why I'm having such an issue with this option and command stuff. Because on top that I flip-flop both from Windows and Mac computers. Let me see if I can get this shot overhead here. I got it. Yes. Okay. This is my keyboard. Okay. And it's connected to my Mac Studio, but it's a Windows computer. And I know that the Alt and the command, or the option and command, are like different on these keyboards, but oh, what did I do there? Sorry. I have an interchangeable cap keyboard, so even though the Windows key was normally there, I just switched it over, and then now this is a Mac computer, even though that the command is the Windows key, and that's why I'm always confusing it, because it's not the Alt and it's like not the control, but I'm like, is it the what command? And that's it. And because my option key is actually my control key, is why I constantly keep getting like flustered on it. So there you go. All right, my OCD kicked in there. All right, let's get back to this and let's check Final Cut Pro once again. Okay, now we're just gonna do a bit of troubleshooting, because I want to see, you see, and yes, Kevin says Alt is option and Windows is command. Exactly. But you see, even though the keyboard was switched, I actually went into the settings and then switched it in the keyboard layout on the computer. So it's still working the way that a Apple computer or keyboard should. It's just got those wrong caps on them. And that's why I always mess it up. But this, let me see if I can figure this out. Why am I not hearing audio? Because the way that I see it, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows even more than I, that right now it doesn't matter whether I'm on Ecamm or not. I should be able to hear everything that my computer is doing. And that's where I'm a little stuck, because I should be hearing all of this. If you guys could let me know if you're here. No, you would see it on your end. Yeah. Yeah, you would definitely see it on your end. Yeah, so for instance, I would mute that, go to Final Cut Pro. Yeah, I'm scrubbing on it, and I'm not seeing anything besides my voice. All right, so let's go back to this. Oh, that sucks. It started the music all over again. right. We march on. Let's see what we're doing here. Checking the preferences. Oh, I wouldn't even be there. Okay, so I guess we're just gonna have to improv this, right? And basically explain it, even though I won't be able to demonstrate it. Okay. Hypothetically, what I would be doing is aligning Doc Rock and Katie's voices so that their conversation is correct, if that makes sense. It should make sense because it's exactly what I would be doing. So I would be listening to the conversation basically to align these up. And how would I do that? I would basically start trimming off Doc's video right here to a point, Katie's here to a point the same way, and then I would kind of like I don't know if you can follow me on here because not being able to listen to it is gonna make it pretty much impossible, but I'm looking at the audio. So here's another trick in Final Cut Pro. Right here next to the effects tab, you have basically your appearance tab. It looks like a little film strip. You're going to click into that, and we're going to change the way that the clip is being displayed in our timeline. So as you can see, if we click this one next to it, the actual images and the files got a little bit like taller, and you do it once more and they get even taller. And what it is that it's emphasizing the audio. If you click the one all the way to the left, you will not see the video at all. You will only see the audio files. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm gonna leave it here, but normally I have it like right there, but just to try to emphasize, to give you the biggest visual, we're looking at the spikes of these conversations, and you could almost see that the gaps of when Katie is talking are kind of fitting in when Doc is not talking. So we're just basically kind of eyeballing it and aligning it to that aspect. So this way it feels like this is the conversation, like Doc is talking and Katie is nodding, and then when he stops talking is when she takes over, and you have the dialogue that way. So let's say hypothetically this is exactly where the conversation lines up. It kind of looks pretty good, right? But I don't know exactly in this case where the recording starts, because with the Flow podcast we kind of have like a kind of improper beginning, and then a couple minutes in they just settle down and they do a 5-second countdown with a 3-second space, which is, I know, the key point or the beginning of the podcast. Sometimes I can see it. Wow, that was loud, Aiden. Okay, sometimes I can see it. I'm just taking a quick scrub. Now it looks like they're already into this conversation. That's like 12 minutes in. Okay. Okay. Not even going to think about it too hard, because without being able to hear it, we really can't, pin it down. But let's say right here that this gap where neither of them are talking, let's say that that's the beginning. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to select both of those, and as my cursor is highlighted on that spot, okay, I'm going to hit this a shortcut, which basically you're just going to trim everything up to the point of your cursor. Now that shortcut is Command left bracket and I have that set up to a button on my mouse. So this little button right here on the top is just a convenience. So wherever I place my mouse, and that's where it's at, I'm just going to lift it so to show you. That's good enough, right? And right now I'm just going to click it, and you'll see that we just shrunkificated the timelines together. So basically the beginning point is in sync. Now going back to where we were, the film strip, next to it is snapping. Now it's not highlighted because I don't like snapping when it comes to editing, but it's useful certain times. The shortcut keyboard on the computer is the letter N, and if you were to press it, you'll see that it turns on and it turns off. But a cool feature is that if you just press and hold it, you can just use it temporarily, and once you let go of your finger, it doesn't stay on. So that's how I might majorly use it. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to take both of these files and I'm going to send them to the beginning half, or right where the intro ends. So now this would be the part where Doc Ross says aloha and starts the podcast. And as you can see, we're already in sync and continue and ready to edit the podcast. But like I said, we're editing for audio first. And all of this was to set up the audio correctly. The audio should match the mouths, right? That they're in sync. And the conversation should be set up the same way. So the next step, while I have both of those files highlighted, I'm going to detach the audio. So I'm just going to right click it and I'm going to detach the audio, which is going to take their audio files and separate them one step even further. So now we have the basically green screen effect overlay. We have the video files separate but synchronized in line with their voices. And just in case, and this is why I do this, just in case you're dealing with a video file where the person's mouth is not in sync with the voice, then you have the ability to change it here by simply clicking on I forgot what it's called. I have it on a shortcut here. Let me see if I can. The trim T. So it's the trim tool, okay? And the trim tool is pretty cool for a couple of different things, right? Like right here, we can click on it and it selects the edge of the timeline, allowing us to move the timeline back and forth, which is very convenient for editing, especially, podcasts like this, where you're going to be cutting people's words and sentences. The ability to stretch out the video file when you're just going to have a little moment of silence really goes a long way. But the trim tool, on top of doing that, also gives you the ability to trim the position of the file. So the trim tool, hovering it over Doc's video file, if I click it, I am able to click and hold and basically move that file back and forth without changing the shape of the file, if that makes sense. See, like it's adjusting it right from the beginning so that I could synchronize his words with his facial movements. Now I'm going to backtrack and backtrack again, okay, to make sure that none of those things are saved because we already have it synchronized. But if you have the ability to listen to the edit while you're doing it, not like it's happening right now, normally you can hear what's going on. You'd be able to recognize if it is off sync, and that's why I separate the audio from the video file, because if I would need to just adjust the audio a hint here or the video placed there, it makes all the difference to be able to just cut a small section and just scoot it, a couple of frames forward or a couple of frames back. So the trim tool is one of the key elements to editing all of this and getting, the words correctly so that people aren't speaking over each other. And then the range tool also is going to give you the ability to fine tune all of the sound while you're doing the edit in the podcast, because just right here at the beginning you can see that there's a lot of extra turbulence between both of the audio files. You see a lot of little miniature spikes which do come through, and we don't want that. All right, so now that I think I've pretty much explained why we're here, I'm going to give you an overview of the entire kind of file. So as you can see, we can take this and just shrinkify it to make it the correct size. We'll be cutting off Doc's back end, so to speak, like this, and we'll continue to edit. Now, one thing that I also have set up on my Stream Deck here are keyboard shortcuts, but your blade tool is Command B. If you do Command Shift B, then that will do a blade all. I've also taken that blade all and made the blade all a shortcut on my Stream Deck, so that when I'm doing these edits, I make sure that I blade it all. Just take everything. But one thing that you have to take in mind is that if you're ever using the trim tool, you would have to basically also hit Command A or Command All so that your trim affects all of the files. Now, this is the way that I do it. There's some people who like to do multicam and things like that. That's a completely different process. This is, like I said, using an overlay to sprucing up a podcast visually on top of doing the audio edits. So that's why I would keep everything separate, and I wouldn't make them a combined clip because of the added feature of the scrubbing or the trimming that you're able to do by just, like I said, taking the file and adjusting it if anything were to get off sync. But it also is very beneficial in different aspects where there has been plenty of times during the podcast where they're both speaking at the same exact time, and when they recognize this, one person will be quiet to let the other person continue. Unfortunately, let me get something to drink here. Unfortunately, if you do, you're gonna have to remove or just deaden that audio so that only one person comes across, because we're thinking about the person who is not seeing any video at all. We're thinking about the person in the audio experience, and having two people speaking at the same exact time, you probably won't be able to make out either of them. So in this same aspect, I am able to take these files and overlap them, and if they're both making key points that need to be illustrated, then I will actually duplicate the clip, right? And I will then mute Doc on one side so that Katie will come through, and then as soon as that part's done, I will reverse the effect and repeat the same exact clip, but mute Katie and then allow Doc to go through. And who I choose to be the second one usually depends on who continues to speak after that point. So if someone just has a small point, I will put that one first and then allow the second person to get their point across and also continue with it. So it's actually taking an overlap feature and extending it by doing so. At the same time, I will take an effect and highlight the individual who's speaking so that you don't see the other person kind of repetitively talking with nothing in the background. Now, at this point, that's the way that I have the podcast set up. But you also have the ability to go full screen, because you can duplicate a file, and if, let's say, you just wanted Katie's point to come across in this instant and Doc was just maybe said something and didn't get his entire thought across, allowing Katie to speak, then I can just basically highlight Katie, making her full screen, and you, the audio and video listener, would be none the wiser. That's why I have designed or just kind of made my workflow to be this way, because it gives me complete granular control. Now, with that also being said, because we're getting close to the hour, how I would edit this is by looking at the gaps, right? Now, in a podcast, for it to make sense, I have to listen to the podcast. So I'm gonna go through it, and I do sometimes listen to it like in 2 times speed, just to try to get the work done a little bit faster. But I will then still have to go and listen to it once again at regular speed to make sure that I didn't miss anything or misconstrue. With that being said, I basically now have just worked into a process where I listen to it slowly the first time and apply all the edits as I go through. And if I get 10 minutes into the hour-long podcast, I know that those first 10 minutes that I've edited are completely solid and ready to go, if that were to make sense. You know, like they're completely done, and I don't have to go back and go over my work, because I'm already building all this process. And if I notice anything, I take care of it instantly and don't leave it for kind of like a back burner, and like I'll listen to it again, so on and so forth. Because when I listen to it again, I'm listening for pops or clicks and ticks and things like that. So whether they're ahs, clicks, you know, sucking of the teeth, you know, that, all that stuff, all that is stuff that I remove, especially the ones that irritate me personally the most, right? There's some okays and of course and ahs and that are inevitable to be part of the conversation, because if not, then it just sounds completely robotic. But I tend to utilize those to my advantage. For example, let's say the conversation, someone was thinking about something and they just said, because, okay, this is what I'm thinking, right? I will take the first and remove it completely, and actually I would take like the middle section and remove it completely and leave that as the breath, so to speak, as the inhaling, the because I think that, and have the conversation flow a lot better, because I'm removing those like stammers or stutters or, you know, like filler words that we all use. And I know I probably have like 100 of them today, but I digress. So all of these filler words is what I'm listening to for the edit. But one thing that I do to easily remove a unwanted sound from one of the 2 audio files is the range tool. And I'm gonna kind of close off with this. So if I wanted to edit anything, right, I'm gonna hit the blade all tool. Why did it do that? That was strange. Hold on, let me see why it would do that. Blade all. It's almost like it's cutting it off completely. Hold on. What is happening? Oh, it's just dropping down. Okay, it looked weird. Basically, we could just do this, right? This. That's the effect. That's what was going on. Okay. So there we go. Basically, we do blade all. If we wanted to take a chunk out, we're just gonna do, once again, Command A, which is gonna select all, and then we can do the shortcut Command backslash, or no, back bracket or left bracket, whichever one of those is correct. And we're gonna click onto that, and you can see you could just basically start taking chunks out. But we're not in the process, or we're not in the game of just like removing entire chunks, because that is the conversation that we're trying to save. So bringing all of that back, I want to reference the range tool, and this is found through Final Cut Pro by just hitting the letter R. And now once again we have the range tool, and what we can do is that we can just highlight over the files. Now if we were to click it when the audio is working, what this does is that scrubbing through the entire timeline, you will hear everything that is audio, because basically the cursor is the size of your Final Cut Pro timeline. So you're scrubbing all that information. When you have the range tool on and you just scrub over this person's or this file, you will only hear that file. That's why the viewer on top just turned black, because we're literally just highlighting the audio file. So if I were to click on Doc's face here, right, and I would use the same range tool, you'll see that it's not giving us any other information except the shrunk down video file that we have for Doc Rock, and I can scrub through that. So in the same manner that you can visually see it here, that's how the audio is going to work. That's why it's not giving you anything, and you could listen to what is going on. So if there's a pop or a sound or something that you want to remove, a word, a text, or not a text, but that's a whole different story. That's editing with the script. But anyway, going here, right, then what you're going to do is that you're going to be isolating that file so that you can listen to it. And with the range tool is really cool, because you can then just scrub over the section that you don't want, and once it's highlighted, you can take the audio line, the adjustment volume, and just grab it and drag it all the way down. And you can see it just created an instant dip. So once the audio gets to that point, anything that was on Doc Rock's, audio feed at that moment is going to be removed completely. You're just not going to hear it. It's going to be complete mute, and we're only going to hear Katie in that instance. So this is also part of like cleaning up the audio, that like this section Katie's talking, right, but maybe Doc was coughing in the background. I will take this entire section, grab it, highlight it, drop it down, and it's gone. So that's one of another like really cool features of Final Cut Pro that makes it easy to edit the dialogue between two people in a podcast format. Now at this point, we've just hit the hour right on the dot, is where I would actually just start hunkering down, because I have everything set up. I will continue to like select all, and like make my cuts, like blade all, take a chunk out, and make the podcast audibly, right, like perfected, so that the person listening to it and not even looking at the video can make sense of the conversation. And once I've got that is when I would go once again and just make sure that the video, that there's no jarring cuts that really are like just off. So for example, let's say Doc, right? Doc, I have like a good minute of him just like nodding his head, right? And just like agreeing with what Katie is saying. So I have a good minute of him just being inaudible and just like agreeing. And then there's a part where I had to mute him because he was trying to say something, but Katie's point was just more important to the conversation. And maybe his thought, he didn't even like proceed on speaking about what he was just mentioning. So it's just kind of something that just needs to be removed because it doesn't add to the conversation. So if that were to happen and I have a section of this where he's like just speaking and I've totally muted him, instead of having it look real bad, I will copy a portion of the section, right, of him being quiet for like 3 minutes, right, and just duplicate that and throw it into that section. So while Katie's talking, it, like I said, you'll be none the wiser, and he'll just be doing the same head nod from 10 minutes before, but because the scenario and everything really doesn't change, you're none the wiser. And it allows me to, like, once again have complete granular control of the entire podcast, both audio and visual. And that's why I'd say that it's a completely different monster when it comes to video podcasting, because you do have to think audio first, but you still have to put that visual aspect in mind. If this was audio only, it would be a lot easier, because you can, like I said, you could just mute certain sections. You can take two parts where people were talking over each other and just space them out so that, each person has their turn and the conversation or the subject at matter is the main driving force of the podcast. And if you can do that and edit basically in the same manner as you would a video, right? But without having to mask an actual video file, right? The fact that Doc was talking at one moment and now he's completely muted, nobody would ever see that if you don't have the video element involved in it. So audio podcasting is not as hard as video podcasting in my point of view, because if I were to remove the video aspect element of this here, then the audio just becomes that much more easy to make it like a coherent conversation. But that's why I said I wanted to share this with you, because when it comes to video podcasting, it's a different monster. But I found that this way has been pretty convenient for me to continue to do my work in the most efficient way possible. So hopefully that helps some of you out who are thinking about starting a podcast or just looking for an easier, better way to edit a podcast in general. This also works whether you want to produce a audio podcast as well, because you can still use these same elements and edit them in the same way using the same NLE, and then be able to clean it up with the tools that are provided there. So really just going to try to round this out. Let's hypothetically imagine that I have the entire hour's worth completely edited and now set up. I will have the beginning, the podcast itself, and then the outro all set up, and the files, right? Like maybe Doc's voice is a lot louder in certain sections. Another thing that Doc does to me all the time is like he fades himself out. So imagine if I was talking to you right now, and while I was talking and I want to make something like a very important point, during that very important point, I'm just gonna start reducing the amount of breath in my voice till it's a whisper. And he does that all the time, or he'll just like fade himself out naturally, like if it was a radio transition, and he'll be like, and I think that that's what's gonna happen tomorrow, and I'm like, oh. So instead of trying to work out and having to range tool that section and bring up his voice and then also bring up the noise floor that's bringing with it, I have been implementing the tools that are part of Final Cut Pro, one of them being the voice isolation. I apply it to Doc and Katie, but at a very minimal percentage. I think I do like 15 to 20% depending on their location. And once I have that set up, I just don't leave it there. I have that just to create the audio file, which I will then level and fix in another program that I use called Alphonic. Now, Alphonic, Doc Rock was actually the one who introduced me to this program. It's a website that you can use and use the features. They give you an hour of processing, I believe, an hour or 4 hours every month. That could be more than enough for your use case scenario, and that's why I bring it up, because if done correctly, you should be able to utilize that program completely free of charge. Because I use Alphonic for my YouTube videos, for my production videos, for basically everything, I've paid the fee for the standalone desktop program. So I mentioned that whether you're using the website or the program, I recommend using Alphonic to level your audio. So in this case, I would take all the audio files and I would apply, like I said, the voice isolation that is found within Final Cut Pro. I'm just going to highlight the audio files, and you can just see it's a simple click of a box. It says voice isolation. It's set at 50. I drag that down to like 15%, and that's basically where I leave it. Thank you, Aiden. I'm almost done. Okay. And this is something that I have set up. So let me show you how I got here as well. Okay, you can grab it, puppy. I thought it was falling. Okay. We are showing Final Cut Pro. Yes. Okay. I'm going to go to the Final Cut Pro menu, and we're going to go to preferences in Final Cut Pro. This small little window pops up here, right? And the one that we're going to think about or worry about in this moment is destinations. And we're going to click destinations. Now you can see that you have plenty of export file. Plenty of options to export your files, and the destinations are the ones that are already preset. So if you want to add a destination, you would just click this here, or you could basically just click and drag this, because we're on a Mac computer, and it says export file 1, and this is basically just a profile. So the profile, then you can click into it and select what you want it to do. And in this format, we would just do audio only, right? ACC, or we want a WAV file, and then QuickTime Player will be a default, but we can just put save only, and then we have this save as a profile to export in Final Cut Pro. That's how simple it is, and you can then rename it to something like audio, which I have right above, and you can see that that's already there. So with that, we're just going to delete this one here, because I've already created that audio file, and that's exactly how I have it. Audio only, wave, save. Okay, and we're going to close that out. So now we can highlight the entire project, right? We're just taking the entire thing, and now I click on my export features, and I'm just going to click audio, and it's going to give me a file there. We're just going to hit next. Flow episode 31 to my hard drive. I click save, and it will quickly extract the audio only, including the intro and outro music of the entire podcast. Once I have that, I will take that file and drop it into Alphonic and level everything, and it will take the small whispering voice sometimes of Doc Rock and bring that right up to level, so that everything is uniform. If things are too loud, it's going to bring it down. If it's too low, it's going to bring it up, and it's going to fix and level everything. I have my Alphonic set up to export the file in a WAV file the same way. A lot of podcast applications only accept MP3s. So it's up to you if you also want to export it from Alphonic into an MP3 format, so that you can get the most out of it. I do it in WAV, because once I have that file, I will then bring it right back into Final Cut Pro. And that's kind of like the last piece that I do. Once I have the level file, I will select all of the audio files, kind of like I'm doing right now, and I will press V to basically shut them off. And now you will see the video file but I've totally just shut off all the audio, and the file that I would get from Alphonic, which is exactly timed because I removed it from this timeline, I will then add it underneath and have a fully mastered, curated audio file, which I then once again have it ready for MP3 so that the audio that is in the video matches the audio that goes out to all the podcatchers like Spotify, Apple Music, and all those things. So the same exact audio experience that you're going to get in the video, you're going to get in the audio only. So it's your choice of how you want to consume it. And, I take this into account because of the way that I watch video podcasts. I'm a YouTube junkie just the same way. And I listen to podcasts on YouTube, even if they're video. A lot of times while I'm doing my chores and doing the things that I need to get done here as a father, I will have the video playing, and only certain times, like if something extravagant happens or very like sporadic or just, you got to see it to believe it happens because of the conversation, is when I will actually focus on watching it. But if it's a podcast, basically is kind of like having people with you in the room as you listen to their conversation. And for that is where I think that, the audio experience is very important. That way, like the audio conversation is going to be the same exact experience that you get on the video side. So if I didn't mention it before, I set my LUFS, or loudness under full scale, which is basically how many decibels your podcast is, to -15. Like -15 is just a bit higher than what they recommend. And that's why I just say basically just one step higher, because I do notice the difference in the audio quality when you just give it that just one little bit of oomph. And I notice it mostly in the video side. When I upload to YouTube, I always love doing 15 LUFS over 16, because playing it back on my phone, I get a better audio experience with the 15 than the 16. And that's just from my own tests. So that's why I will, pass that information on to you, because that is how I prefer listening to it. And if you are listening to it on headphones or on a phone or anything like that, whether video or audio only, I think 15 LUFS, LUFS, loudness under full scale, is the option that I have my Alphonic set to, and that's where I level everything out. And that's basically it. Besides the time that you spend on actually editing your timeline is going to be basically how much time you're going to be taking on your edits. So that it really is dependent. Some people just record and just don't touch it, and that's it, and they're gonna upload it, kind of like what I do with my live streams, right? But I have been taking the initiative to record the podcast sessions within my live stream so that I can repurpose that as well. Mostly has to do with the time that I need to make, not the time that I need to take, the time that I need to make and set aside to start doing those podcast edits. But I think that's something that we might do next week. So with this week showing you how I set up with Final Cut Pro, I think next week, just thought of it right now, I can start to edit the first episode of the Camera Junkie podcast, and we can start working on actually making it a podcast and getting it audio and video out as well, using these same methods. So if you found this useful, you found some information, just know that you can come back next week, and I'm going to be working on the first episode of the Camera Junkie podcast edit in Final Cut Pro, basically the same way, showing you all the intricacies. And I'm going to make sure that we have audio. because that's going to be very important, right? To the edit of the podcast, to be able to listen to what is going on. All right. And with that being said, we're chugging along. This is the section that we can't forget, Cities Gall. Channels that I think you should go and watch. And this week, because we're talking about Final Cut Pro, we're going to be talking about Jen Pro. And I call her Jen Pro because I really don't know the exact pronunciation of her last name. So I don't know if it's Jaeger or Jaeger, right? But I digress. But Jen Pro is an amazing creator that has a lot of great information to learn more about this amazing program, Final Cut Pro. Someone that I found through another creator that has been on Cities Gall before, Matthew O'Brien, or Midland Pictures, Broccoli Squad, you know who I'm talking about. Through his Discord of the Broccoli Squad, I was able to be made aware of Jen and her tutorials when it comes to Apple Motion and Final Cut Pro. Another great source of information and a lot of great videos to help you along in your Final Cut Pro and Apple Motion journey. So if you haven't heard of her before, definitely worth a look. I would definitely tell you check out her content. She's very laid back and she's got a nice soothing tone, to like a good teacher, you know, and she breaks it down in a good way that I think is very understandable for all of the camera junkies and anyone who's looking into Final Cut Pro. So Jen Pro, Jen Jaeger or Jaeger, not sure exactly how you say it, but she's this week's Cities Gall. Channels that I think you should go and watch. What happened to my graphic? There we go. Cities Gall. Channels that I think you should go and watch. Boom. Like, lost the graphic there. Come on, work with me. All right, so we got it in. Another episode in the books. And as always, I want to thank you all for taking the time and hanging out here with me. Hopefully, I made some, I got my points across. I'm most likely going to be re-listening to this podcast to see how bad I messed up, or if I could just leave it for like basically the way it is. So it says, I hear you and your background music, but not any sound from Dr. Katie either. Okay, so we weren't getting anything. So, silence, Doc. Says you need to bring your system audio into the broadcast. Is that what was going on? Because let me see here. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly, but I'll figure it out for next week, but I'll definitely be looking into it. The thing is that the system audio should be there. That's what I was saying. Like, even if you guys couldn't hear it, I should still be able to hear it. Because nonetheless, like, let's say nothing is out. I was literally just checking my computer and I'm like, yes, the interface that I'm using for the microphone is the Zoom PodTrack P4. And that's what I'm listening to. So all of the audio from the computer, everything is being routed to that. So even if it's not coming out to Ecamm, which is completely separate, I should still be able to hear it. And that's why I was like, it really left me dumbfounded. But I appreciate the thoughts and I will definitely be looking into it for next week. It says you don't see any indication of, exactly. I saw no indication. There was no bars moving. That's why I paused the music to just check it so that I can scrub the timeline, and nothing really happened. It says, Chris working for you? Didn't hear a thing. Dude, that was so loud when Aiden. He just dropped an entire... Look. this entire basket of toys. Just boom, drop. Whoa. Just crazy. This is way cool. Very thorough. Thank you. Says, I was under the impression that you edit podcasts on the script. Saludo. No. Katie actually does the transcripts afterwards. So once I'm done with my edits and I have them, both the audio and the video, sent through, she will take it, put it in the script so that she can get another transcript and be able to make the blog posts, like all the information that she needs to get, and also the captions that are very important for podcasts, especially in the video aspect. But going from the information that she has given me, it's also very good for like the SEO on the podcast themselves, or basically there's a lot of podcasters or people who love listening to podcasts who love reading the dialogue along with listening to it. So it's like reading a book with having, you know, the audio version in your ear while you read it. It's almost like, you know, now that I think about it, it's almost like kindergarten, right? When the teacher, and Gretchen, I guess your face is what inspired me. Like when a teacher would read a children's book to someone, they're reading it themselves, right? They're reading the words, but having somebody like iterate those words, kind of the stories sink into the memory better. So Kevin says, thanks for the breakdown. Picked out a few tools for the toolbox. Thank you. And I did my best, because I'm going to also mention this. All those shortcuts, I have them on my Stream Deck and on my mouse. So believe it or not, like this MX mouse has quite a few buttons. The two buttons that I have here on the side, the back one is the range tool. The front arrow is the normal like arrow in Final Cut. This one here is the basically where you, how you say, shrinkify, I keep forgetting, where you're basically clipping the end, right? And you're bringing everything to your cursor. So I have that set up, and basically the way that I run through edits is like I put my cursor on the timeline, hit blade all, and then just scrub to what I want to remove. And as it's selected, I then hit that little button on my mouse, and it's just like everything gets chopped off. And then the scroll wheel, right? The scroll wheel, the little click inside of the scroll wheel, instead of having that switch between like the fast scroll and the click scroll on the mouse itself, I totally convert that to be the trim tool. So with the trim, the clip from the end, and the range tool on my mouse. Oh, and there's another button here. And the button here that you click down has my default transition. So the transition that I ever want to put on, basically just the cross dissolve real quick, I can go to any point and just hit that button, and my cross dissolve is on the timeline. So that and the keyboard shortcuts that I have on the Stream Deck, I barely use my keyboard at all. So I did my best on trying to remember all of those shortcuts that I don't really call out by name anymore, because they're all set up on my equipment. Says, might have a new opportunity to do what you're doing with for Ecamm for someone who is a big player. Oh, let me move that. In the Disney space when it comes to news and updates. That's really cool. And Paul put the link to Alphonic. Thank you very much. Says, wow, this is a professional curated video podcast. Nice. Thank you. I thank you. Okay, so Mr. Moderator's got his fingers crossed for you. He says, good info. Learns some new stuff. Cool, man. Says thank you. Figuring out pricing, which is the most difficult part for me personally. I think it is for a lot of us, man. And the way that I always try to start thinking about this, Kevin, right? Put it on them. Put it on them sometimes, you know, and it's just depending on which client it is. If you can be privy to what their budget is, that would be ideal. But that's what I would ask them. I'll be like, what is your budget for this position, to see if I can fill it? And if it's more than what you would have wanted to charge, then do your best to like hold your smile so that you could just earn that extra, you know, that extra payday, because that's all it is. But a lot of times when people ask me for work, when we're having a conversation, I ask them, what's your budget? How much are you thinking about doing this, to see if it's something that's even viable for me? Because if it's not, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, right? But I wish you all the best, and I know that you probably be able to figure it out. To give you, Kevin, a little bit piece of extra advice, I will tell you to look at the Ecamm channel on YouTube, the Ecamm playlist for Showrunner with Stephanie Liu. Or Stephanie Garcia, but then it will still be under Stephanie Liu. Check that out, because there was one episode, I wish I could tell you which one right off the top of my head, but you should be able to scroll through it, where she breaks down pricing, and it is so informative. And there's even like a worksheet that they give you that really puts things into perspective of what it is that they're asking you to do, whoever it is, and how many roles or how many hats that you need to put on to execute such thing. So, you know, as a solo producer, I'm here, I'm doing like overlays, so I'm doing graphic arts, I'm doing the video itself, like the recording, so I'm the cameraman, I'm doing the editing, so I'm the editor, I'm doing audio processing, I'm doing color grading. Like, all of these things are different hats that we put for our own productions, but we kind of de-emphasize in all the different roles that we take on when we create our content. So with that worksheet, I would definitely once again recommend you taking a look at that, because she puts it into a formulaic aspect where you can just put all of the things that they're asking you to do and itemize them, right? And then set basically like an hourly rate to it, so that you can come up with a regulated number that you can show them. Yeah, you're gonna need 3 hours of, you know, a production assistant, which I'm gonna be wearing that hat, but that's another charge that needs to be implemented, for the simple fact that if you decide to expand and they ask you to grow more, that you're not limiting your production to prices that you've set for yourself. So for example, why would I say that? Well, let's say they are happy with your production and want to expand upon it, but for you to expand upon it, you have to hire someone else. And then when you go to hire someone else, you realize that you were way undercutting your own prices. And now, even if they wanted to double up your contract, that doesn't make enough dollars for it to make sense for you to hire anyone else. So that's where I would tell you, really emphasize on the multiple like hats and roles that you're going to be taking on, and emphasize to make sure that you charge for all of them. That way you can provide the best service that you can, and if they want more of it, then you'll be able to continue to keep that high bar of value, so to speak. You know, even if it is paying someone else to help you with a lot of the work, depending on what it is. So that would be my advice to you, and I wish you all the best. Hopefully it should all work out, because you're the shiznit. So, all right. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm not possibly working on some special content as well, so it should be pretty good. Paying opportunity, nice. Just came up. Oh, go back and rewatch that. It's been a year or more since I watched that video. Yeah, it's been a while, and she has 2 showrunner seasons, so I'm not sure, but I believe it was season 2 where she gave the price list. So it says there are chapter markers on that video. He's saying it because he put them on there. So thank you to Paul for being such an amazing moderator. Thank you, Kevin, as always, for hanging out. And that's what I'm going to call it. Everyone, thank you for hanging out. Another episode in the books. I was very Puerto Rican by taking another extra 15 minutes to say bye. But I could only be what I am. So, as always, if you want to check us out next week, we're going to be here doing it all over again, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Same Junkie channel. Could only find it here, episode 120. I'm going to be editing the first video podcast episode of the Camera Junkie podcast that I've already recorded 20 episodes ago. So knowing that I have plenty in the can to start pumping those out and get at least 3 actual podcasts in, to then be able to drop that as like my channel like trailer, so to speak, and then have 3 episodes to give people to binge on, and then start trickling out episodes weekly to keep them, to keep the ball rolling. So that's the plan. But also the plan is that the time that we spend here, I'm going to take to also build this out. So I'm going to take you along on the journey as I do this. We're going to be opening up a Captivate, like podcasting. Subscription. That was the word that I'm like, it's a program. Yeah, but what is it that I need to do to pay for the subscription, the account? I need to create an account in Captivate for the podcast so that we can start getting the audio out there. And I'm also probably going to ask you to see exactly how I do it. If I should create another channel, which I have available, to make it the podcast only, or if I should add it to this channel. Maybe I'll make a poll for next week or something like that to see what you guys think about that. But as always, thank you. Have a great night. Take care of yourselves. Actually, have a great week. Take care of yourselves and each other. And I will see all of your beautiful smiling faces next week, right here on the Camera Junkie live stream.